Hello everyone, let me just set up here. Okay. All right, it's amazing to see a very large room full of people. My name is Mel Gelderman. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Token Card. I think this is our second community meetup. I think we'll do a lot more from now on because we're transitioning to actually being live, which is great. So, yes. So, I'm getting nice laser eye surgery. I understand that there's quite a wide range of people here, both people from our community, I've already noticed. Of course, thank you all for coming, that's amazing. As well as people from the payments industry, as well as people from the Ethereum space, so thank you all for coming. And I guess everyone in between as well. How many people know enough about Ethereum, just so I gauge the room? A good understanding of Ethereum. How many people don't? It's like quite new? Okay. Well, thank you all for attending. I'm going to give a short presentation about what we're trying to build and what hopefully impacts we can have on the world. Because, as it says over there, we're trying to build a consumer banking platform on top of Ethereum. This is something that has never been done before. We are part of an entirely new paradigm, and I hope I can tell you a bit about that today. So, last thing before I start, I think I'm okay with questions throughout if there's like very urgent questions, mainly because it's, I want to go in depth, but I also can't go too much in depth. So if things are unclear, feel free to put your hand up. So, a little bit, I'm in the shadow. So a little bit about myself, I suppose. I think I've always been quite interested in exponential technologies, in particular technologies that could somehow change and reshape society. So, when I was very young, I built my own model aircraft from the ground up, and I was one of the first people to do VR. This is my friend over here. And at some point, I also built my first company, which was just me, so it wasn't very big or anything, but it was an algae biofuel company. And through it, I hoped to fundamentally tackle one of the biggest challenges in the world, which I hope everyone agrees is climate change. And at some point I kind of realized that I think there are probably more deep-rooted problems in the world that we should tackle, that if we solve, would probably have much bigger impacts on society altogether. And I always felt that no one really was challenging the status quo, the way our society itself works, up until I discovered Bitcoin. And so Bitcoin was pretty amazing because it was the first time I had this feeling that there was this new technology that really was targeting the fundamental structure of society itself. So, as far as I could tell, when I was that age, money underpins how. Money and the control of money underpins how society works, right? It drives us. Literally, we spend all our days working. Why? Because of money, right? And because we love our work, of course. But it's a very powerful part of society. And if we were somehow to be able to change the nature of it, because right now we all get our salaries paid into this massive institution called a bank, right? And it's a bit of a no-brainer. This is done across the whole world, but this probably leads to all kind of weird power dynamics. So if we could change that, but I'm skipping ahead a bit, sorry. So, yes, Bitcoin was amazing because it showed us that you could, for the first time, have complete sovereignty over your own assets. It showed us that rather than trusting a government or a bank, you could literally just trust the code. There was nothing else. It showed that you could actually understand a new financial system like this in the span of a week. It took me probably a week or so to really get my head around Bitcoin on even the most technical levels. And even my younger brother understood it in a few days, which would take us to understand like the financial world of old, right, it would take us, maybe even a lifetime to some degree. So that was quite amazing. And fundamentally, what Bitcoin showed us is that we could do peer-to-peer transactions with no intermediaries. And I really took that to heart. So I was one of the crazy people who tried to live Bitcoin, right? I traveled around the world without a bank account, and with around the world I mean like towards the east in particular, because there was more Bitcoin stuff over there. And there were in the Bitcoin space, however, there were issues, right? So of course over here there was a massive scaling debates, regrettably, and there were copious amounts of hacks. Someone in this room is very familiar with this. I've already heard. Over here, one of my friends, Leo Treasure, he's Australian. He hit headlines because his laptop got hacked, and he lost 750 Bitcoin overnight because of remote desktop software. And as you can see, he's calling for multi-sig solutions, which I'll tell more about in a minute. And fundamentally, I was here because of this, right? So I was trying to actually live, the dream that all the Bitcoiners were dreaming about back then, which is that you could actually have your own bank in your pocket and you would need nothing else. But there were, this never quite caught on. The network effects of like Bitcoin being accepted everywhere never really took off. And so, thankfully, however, most of these challenges were about to be solved, and because Ethereum came out, essentially. And Ethereum didn't just incrementally improve upon Bitcoin, it added an entirely new technology into the mix. So Ethereum, of course, added the idea of a virtual machine onto the idea of a blockchain. And this now, suddenly we went from just being able to do peer-to-peer transactions, which is definitely very cool, suddenly we were able to put entire financial applications on top of this network. With Bitcoin, Bitcoin was its own product, Bitcoin was the product. With Ethereum isn't the product, Ethereum is the platform on top of which you can build products. And so the moment I read about Ethereum in 2014, it was like, immediately I knew like, this is it, this is where the space is going. It like suddenly expanded the horizon of what we could do with blockchain for the first time to be almost limitless. And so in the months after Ethereum went live in 2015, we started to see the first applications be developed or be announced to be built on top of Ethereum. So two of these, of course, everyone, I presume most people know Maker. A bit less popular, but still just as impressive and amazing, is Digix over here. And so these are two platforms that, for the first time in history, with teams as small as our own, or I guess at the time they were just 3-4 people, we're starting to develop and announce platforms and projects that were doing stuff that financial institutions that were orders of magnitude bigger and older had not been able to achieve. And they were just doing this with a bunch of guys like us. And so this is quite amazing, because it was clear to us, to myself and David, that for the first time we were starting to witness the birth of an entirely new economic paradigm. Something that was like completely separate from everything that had existed before it. And so our idea was essentially that this is all fantastic, and it works for technologists like everyone in this room, I presume. But how can we make this work for the people out there? How can we actually make this viable as a lifestyle? And so that is where the token card essentially started. And so we're essentially, because of this, because of Ethereum, and because of the Ethereum ecosystem that was being built on top of it, we, for the first time, had an opportunity to thoroughly reimagine what banking could mean. Like, completely reimagine from the bottom up, right? Unlike top-down, like challenger banks, and I love challenger banks. If anyone works for a challenger bank, they're amazing, but they're only really incrementally improving on what banking is today. They're the same model. They've learned a lot from the UI revolution that we're experiencing, but they're not fundamentally changing the nature of money. And so like they're not fundamentally doing enough challenging. So, and that is exactly what we think the Ethereum economy is doing. It is going to completely challenge the world economy at large. And we are trying to build the first experience, the first consumer banking experience. And David doesn't like when I say experience because it's the real deal. It's not just an illusion. It's actually, it's a platform. So the first consumer banking platform for Ethereum that is trying to allow anyone to literally say goodbye to the old world, right? And start to build your life on this new paradigm. So a few things, I guess, that are of note, if everyone can read. So indeed, one of the key differences for a user is going to be that you can quite literally at some point hold every asset that might exist, right? So now we're only just starting, we're only just seeing stuff like gold and dollar, like decentralized dollar tokens appear on the network, but quite soon we'll start to see anything from stocks to bonds to other digital assets, like from games to all the way through to at some point you could buy a piece of the Mona Lisa, right? You could buy like 1% of the Mona Lisa and hold some of your value in 19th century art. At some point you'll be able to hold, you'll in the future, if you buy an iPhone, instead of getting some crappy receipt that you get now, and even they email them, which is already quite ahead of the curve. You'll just get a token, a non-fungible token, which represents that iPhone, right? And that's how you manage it. That's like your digital ownership. If you go to Sainsbury's in the future, rather than just getting a receipt, you'll get a token sent to your wallet, which when you click on it will show every item you purchased that day, and you'll be able to click through to that to see the provenance of everything that has to do with that particular product, right? You'll literally be able to see that, oh, this piece of steak had used this much carbon credits essentially to be produced, this much water, had these injections, came from this part of the world. The entire provenance of an asset could be represented in a token in your wallet. In the future, if you buy a Tesla car, you won't get a key. You'll get a token which represents not just ownership but the key itself. You could lend it out. You could create like a ghost copy and lend it out for a day, and have someone have it automatically disappear after the person has used it. You could access to your house for your cleaner could only give access to a certain day or between a certain time. In the future, you'll be able to have in your wallet, anything from your own identity represented to your subscriptions, your Netflix, to your insurances, etc. And so that's one thing, right? I guess in a way, I'm gonna just skip ahead. In a way, what this kind of leads to is we start to create an experience which is looking a lot less like Monzo, even though right now our experience is Monzo plus crypto kind of vibe. And it's going to start to look a hell of a lot more like how we live our gaming lives. So this is Skyrim, right? In Skyrim, you click I on your keyboard or start on your PlayStation controller, and you open your inventory, and you have everything from your swords to your cabbages, to your potions, right? And as well as your gold, right? And so that's literally what our lives in the future are going to be like. And that's really only possible to this degree on Ethereum. And it's for the first time going to give people an incredible amount of control. Because, coming back to this, because it's non-custodial, right? So right now, when you buy, forget money, the banks are doing all kinds of stuff with your money, right, that you don't agree with. They're making profits off of it. Forget money. If you buy a piece of music from Apple Music, you don't really own that music, right? As long as Apple is live, you'll be able to stream it. But in contrast with when you purchased the CD back in the day, you don't really own that music anymore. But in the future, with this new, technology, you will actually own this song, right? You'll be issued a token which you can hold in your own wallet, which you can withdraw from Apple Music, and you can then stream it with Spotify if you want. It's a digital ownership. And so, what's more, for our banking experience, we'll be able to tap into the entire Ethereum ecosystem. So rather than us having to build everything ourselves, we can leverage the very best. So, obviously there's going to be, as an easy example, there'll be 10 lending platforms built in Ethereum. of which maybe one in particular is amazing and does so much better than any other bank could ever do in the world. And we can just plug it in. We don't have to build it ourselves. We can literally just pick. There's going to be this evolutionary, survival of the fittest going on in all these industries, and we can literally just hook it all up and provide the user with a banking experience, which even if you're just intending to hold pounds, right, hypothetically, like with your Monzo, you'll definitely at some point be provided with better services on the most basic level because of the nature of the industry. It's synergetic. And so another thing for us is that we don't hold customer funds, and so we're not nearly as scary to the regulator as, say, a new bank is, or an e-money institute, or an exchange that takes deposits of customers' funds, because they get hacked all the time. They might, play with your money. They might not hold, they might operate on fractional reserve. We literally can't do that. That's why the FCA, we're in the FCA sandbox, was so incredibly excited about us, because they realized that consumer protection goes up significantly if the world moves towards this kind of model. So that's another good thing. Then it says 28 minutes, but this has been on for a while. So yeah, there's better transparency as well. This is an AML point, so anti-money laundering point. So right now, Revolut, for example, can only see, if money's coming in, it can only see the last jump from the bank that you sent it from. It can't see anything that preceded that. And so AML is possible in the current world, but it's quite difficult. You can only see the last data points. Whereas on the blockchain, you can literally trace back to origin itself. And this is important for the regulator, because it means that even though now our space is still unfortunately tainted a bit, right? At some point as time goes on, there is no question that AML on the blockchain will be better than it could ever be in the old world. And so yeah, even and this is, if you're buying weed or something, all right, but ultimately this is great, because it just means that the dodgy shadiness that our world currently literally operates on, right? The amount of money that gets moved around. I heard all kinds of crazy stories from the SFO. It will be amazing if we can start to bring into picture how money really works and moves across the world between our societies. Anyway, so yes, this is super alpha, of course, Misha. So yes, in a way, we're trying to build an uncompromised banking experience on Ethereum. So everything else that exists in the industry today, to have utility, to have to spend stuff in the real world, or this or that, or exchange stuff, with the exception of DEXs, you are compromising, because you're giving away your crypto to this organization. And we've built the first system where you're not doing that, which is so important. And so, yes, I hope everyone will, this is not the end, I know this sounds like the end, but I hope everyone will start to say goodbye. It will allow you to start to say goodbye to the old financial world, literally withdrawing your money for one last time from the old world, and start to become a part of this new paradigm. You guys will literally be able to become a citizen of Ethereum for the first time ever. And hopefully, this, where this kind of leads to is, as time goes on, as we start to inch towards the singularity, tinfoil hat, we really will need to go through a transformation on a very fundamental societal level, right? There's no question the way the world works right now will not get us to the singularity. We have to change society itself, and I think that is what Ethereum is promising, and that's why this is so important. So, yes, let's see. Whoops, sorry. So this is what we have today. Misha is going to talk a lot more about this, so I'm going to keep this very short. But fundamentally, we've built an experience which is quite similar to, on an initial level, to the best apps you experience in the industry today, such as Cypher Browser and Coinbase Wallets, where you retain control of your own funds. However, With our experience, because of the card, you can use it in the real world, right? Which is something none of them offer right now. And like Gnosis Safe, right, which they're doing amazing work as well, we have a user deploy a smart contract wallet, right? And this is completely the state of the art, because up until now, users have always held funds on a key, right? And this is inherently a bit flawed, because the moment the moment your laptop is compromised, or the moment you lose your key, all your money is gone, and there's no recourse. It's like you're sitting on top of a hill, and at any moment you could start rolling, and it's like end of story. And so we've actually used Ethereum itself, smart contracts themselves, to enhance your security, to programmatically decide how your money is going to be managed. And that's through these two functions, the daily limits and the whitelisted address. But I'm going to keep it at that. So yeah, a bit more about that. Our wallet is a third generation wallet, where first generation was keys, and this is a paper wallet. I'm sure some people here have used paper wallets in the past. This is a second generation wallet, a ledger wallet, which is out of necessity, because this stuff was always so scary. You don't want to keep a key on your laptop or something, because stuff does go wrong. Even happens to the best of us, as you saw with Leo. This is great, but it's definitely not the answer. If our future of money vision requires everyone in the world to walk around with this thing dangling around their neck, it's not happening, right? It's a great interim solution. Not to mention the fact that you still can't quite trust this. Instead, where we're going is that you'll be able to deploy your own digital bank, essentially, on the Ethereum network. So all our users, when they get the app, they deploy their own smart contract wallets onto the Ethereum network. And in this, this is like about 2,000 lines of code. We added some more recently, more functions. Your funds will be governed in a way that only you control. There are functions that you can set up, that you can call once right now, that determine how your funds are released and managed. And so that's very cool. Now, yes, this is now put on your tinfoil hats. So, what we've tried to create with TKN, one of the things that always struck me when I was young was the idea that we're all working for money, right? Like, I would always see my parents, and it would just strike me as such a weird concept that this massive institution called a central bank and all their bank friends were like issuing the stuff that people would like work their whole lives for, but also they would have the ability to devalue that at any point in time, however they wanted. And so I always found that quite strange. So if you look here, these are two charts. The time scales are very different on either, but they illustrate the points, this logarithmic scale. So this is the value of the pound of the last few hundred years, actually, but it's going down. And this is very weird, because if you were to think about, if you work in a company and you're getting share options in a company, if everyone works hard, the value of your shares goes up, right? Why doesn't this apply on a national level? Why isn't it so that if we, why isn't there a correlation between our national currency and the success, the economic success of this country, this big project we're all working on? And yeah, why doesn't it look a lot more like the FTSE 100, for example? Wouldn't it be more amazing as the de facto currency that most people that aren't financially illiterate hold, right? Why doesn't our currency look a lot more like this? And so fundamentally, this is what we've done with TKN, where we've built a token which, as time goes on, starts to become directly correlated to not Ethereum, but to the Ethereum economy at large, right? Because the way it works, and I haven't put this in my slides, but every time someone uses the card, right, every time they top up, or in the future spend as you go, Contis, so they will remit a tiny percentage as a licensing fee to this asset contract, and this is and TKN is directly backed by this. And so that means that as time goes on, this contract becomes filled with all the different assets being used in the Ethereum economy, proportional to what people are using, right? So if people are topping up a lot with gold tokens, then that will naturally become a larger proportion. And so TKN is a proxy for the success of the Ethereum economy itself. And so it starts to become essentially like a currency that is hard backed by the economy it's supposed to represent, which I think is a cooler currency altogether. Now, yes, in a way, what I'm saying, well, the other thing that's going on is that the pound itself, fiat currencies, will become completely disintermediated altogether over the coming 5-10 years, because the main use for them, the reason they exist altogether, is that that we can exchange goods, right? That we have a common currency. But what's going on in our industry right now through token card, in fact, is that you can hold any asset. You don't have to hold pounds anymore. You can hold gold. You can hold Mona Lisa, and so and the person you're paying to can still receive whatever they want. And so the need for fiat currency as a medium of exchange starts to dissolve in and of itself. And so that's an interesting phenomenon too. Yes. Then I think where this all kind of leads to, hopefully, is that we will start to change our society on a very fundamental level. A society that will actually take us into the eons to come, that we can like believe in and not think that we're screwing up the world. A society where people actually feel in control of the world around them, rather than, the most control people feel today is that they vote once every few years. That's not what I call democracy, even though we're like highest on the democracy index. This index is shit. So I think a world where, the value that people create, we all work, we all earn money, and a world where your value can be put into assets that you actually believe in, rather than be put into stuff, that these massive institutions called banks put them in. I think that's a world, we should see. That'll definitely make the world a better place. One that transcends corruption, economic slavery, and transcends puts society beyond the control of those who seek to control it. So, yes, I'll leave you with one last quote. So, this is from 2015 by Tom Goodwin from TechCrunch. So, Uber, the world's largest taxi company, owns no vehicles. Facebook, the world's most important media owner, creates no content. Alibaba, the most valuable retailer, has no inventory. And Airbnb, the world's largest accommodation provider, owns no real estate. Something interesting is happening. Now, this is definitely not a good analogy for what we're doing, for reasons, and that's because this is Web 2.0. We're living through the golden age of the current state of the web. However, maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years from today, we will be living through a new renaissance of decentralization. And perhaps, so I'll leave you with this thought, that one day, not so far from now, the biggest bank will hold no customer deposits. And so let's see if we get there. Thank you.